You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynne Moeller. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday the 28th of June 2013. Lesbian murders 2-year-old son, is jailed for 18 years. Melanie Phillips, the British government's jihad against free thought. National Police Unit monitors 9,000 domestic extremists. Nuclear industry watches thorium tests in Norway. Ireland, doctors warn Muslims with diabetes over Ramadan fasting. Germany demands answers from Britain over GCHQ surveillance. Nick Griffin, MEP from the belly of the beast, on the neocon foreign policy. Saudi police stop wedding in park. Qatar, new emir, new broom. California man faces 13 years in jail for scribbling anti-bank messages in chalk. Thought for the day, Alice through the looking glass. And finally, women's conference? Oh really? UK news. Lesbian murders 2-year-old son and is jailed for 18 years. The child, described as beautiful to everyone who knew him, was brutally beaten to death by what police describe as a monster. Rebecca Shuttleworth battered little Keanu Williams to death in a horrific attack that the World at 8 refuses to describe. She's recently celebrated a £10,000 lottery win with her lesbian lover in Manchester before being found guilty, and said that will do for a nice holiday. Shuttleworth committed the murder in a bedsit in Birmingham, where the toddler's body was found by police. One local person commented, "This is as brutal as what happened to poor Jamie Bulger, but because she's a lesbian it'll be played down in the light of political correctness. The child should have grown up in a normal family home." Melanie Phillips, the British government's jihad against free thought. By banning from the country, as extremists, the American anti-jihadis Robert Spencer and Pamela Geller, the Home Secretary Theresa May has not only made herself look ridiculous, but has sent the enemies of the United Kingdom the message that they have it on the run. I do not support the approach taken by either Geller or Spencer to the problem of Islamic extremism. Both have endorsed groups such as the EDL and others which at best do not deal with the thuggish elements in their ranks and at worst are truly racist or xenophobic. The result has been a serious blow to the credibility of these two writers, with particular damage being done to Spencer, whose scholarship in itself is scrupulous. It also has split the defence against Islamic extremism and handed a potent propaganda weapon to those who seek falsely to portray as bigoted extremists all who are engaged in the defence of the West against the Islamic jihad. Nevertheless, the decision to ban this duo from Britain is unjustified, oppressive and comes perilously close to lining up the British government alongside those who wish to silence defenders of the West against the jihad, making a total mockery of Britain's understanding of just who presents a danger to the state. Neither Geller nor Spencer remotely presents such a danger. They intended to come to Britain to join an EDL rally in Woolwich in the wake of the barbaric murder there of drummer Lee Rigby by 2 Islamists last month. More can be found on Melanie's blog at melaniephillips.com. National Police Unit monitors 9,000 domestic extremists. Officers familiar with workings of UNIT indicate that many of campaigners listed on database have no criminal record. A national police unit that uses undercover officers to spy on political groups is currently monitoring almost 9,000 people it has deemed domestic extremists. The National Domestic Extremism Unit is using surveillance techniques to monitor campaigners who are listed on the secret database, details of which have been disclosed to The Guardian after a Freedom of Information request. A total of 8,931 individuals have their own record on a database kept by the unit, for which the Metropolitan Police is the lead force. It currently uses surveillance techniques including undercover police, paid informants and intercepts against political campaigners from across the spectrum. Senior officers familiar with the workings of the unit have indicated to The Guardian that many of the campaigners listed on the database have no criminal record. European news. Nuclear industry watches thorium tests in Norway. A small Norwegian company is testing thorium fuel as a replacement for uranium at a reactor in Norway, catching the attention of the conventional nuclear industry, which has acknowledged that thorium could provide a safer and less weapons-prone nuclear power future. Oslo-based Thor Energy started burning thorium at a test reactor in Halden, Norway in late April. While thorium enthusiasts promote the element as a safer alternative to uranium, the conventional industry, built on uranium, often downplays the element named after the Norse god of thunder. Thus it was notable when World Nuclear News took part of the trial last week and played up thorium's potential superiority. WNA is part of the World Nuclear Association, a conventional nuclear industry group. In its story it pointed out that thorium promises higher operating safety margins and produces no plutonium as it operates. Ireland. Doctors warn Muslims with diabetes over Ramadan fasting. Muslims with type 2 diabetes in Ireland who intend to fast during the upcoming Ramadan are being warned that advanced planning with their doctor is vital to avoid developing acute complications. Many Muslims with diabetes may choose to fast during Ramadan, the 9th month of the Islamic calendar, observed worldwide as a month of fasting. Despite guideline recommendations for the management of diabetes during this time, there are an estimated 49,204 Muslims in Ireland, according to the latest CSO figures, representing a sharp increase over the previous 5 years. Ireland's Muslim population includes 8,322 primary school-aged children and 3,582 of secondary school age, among whom diabetes is also on the increase. World Today says, "I thought fasting was good for diabetics to reduce their weight and lessen the medication needed, so it should be all systems go on fasting for the whole bag and baggage of them, permanently." Germany demands answers from Britain over GCHQ surveillance. The German government has expressed its rising anger over Britain's monitoring of global phone and internet traffic and has directly challenged the legality of the controversial surveillance project. On Tuesday, Justice Minister Sabine Lauthauser-Schnarrenberger sent 2 letters to the British Justice Secretary Chris Grayling and the Home Secretary Theresa May, demanding to know the extent to which German citizens have been targeted and warning that democracy could not flourish when states employ a veil of secrecy to obscure their actions. Describing the revelations over GCHQ's surveillance operation as like a Hollywood nightmare, Lauthauser-Schnarrenberger asked for clarification of the legal basis for Project Tempora and demanded to know whether the programme had been authorised by any judicial authority, according to The Guardian. She also asked for information on the specific nature of data that was collected and whether concrete suspicions triggered the data collection. World Today states, "This is coals to Newcastle, isn't it? Are we talking of the founders of the Gestapo and the Stasi?" Belly of the Beast. I now hand you over to Nick Griffin MEP, who talks today on the neocon conspiracy.
One recent piece of news in the Brussels belly of the beast is that Catherine Ashton, EU Foreign Policy Chief, has tried and failed to remove the EU's Special Envoy to the Middle East peace process, Andreas Reinecker. Tony Blair's favourite common-purpose leftist, Ashton, is trying to shift the EU's position on the Middle East to align it with that of Blair and, far more importantly of course, the USA. Because the Europeans want to concentrate on the problem of illegal Israeli settlements, which are making a two-state solution to the Palestinian problem even more difficult, whereas Blair, the British government and the people who run the United States, of course, just want war. When one talks about US foreign policy, the truth of course is that it's neocon foreign policy, and I want to talk today about the neocons. This is something, not really an organisation, but a very powerful tendency, which is organised and funded by an unholy alliance of mega-rich WASP industrialists, such as Dick Cheney, effective CEO for a long time of the giant company Halliburton, which makes literally billions of dollars every time they con the rest of us into the war, and crazed ultra-Zionist Jews such as Pearl and Wolfowitz, who of course want to use the United States and Britain in order to secure the right of extremist Zionists in Israel/Palestine to create settlements all over what they call Eretz Israel, Greater Israel. The US neocons' ideas are set out in 2 key documents. The first, produced in 1996, was called Clean Break. This was advice to the incoming Likud, i.e. extreme, nearly fascist Israeli political party, Premier Benjamin Netanyahu. It told him that using force to topple unfriendly Arab regimes, such as, of course, Gaddafi's Libya and Assad's Syria, could make accommodation with the Palestinians, i.e. justice, for the people whose land has been stolen, completely unnecessary, and allow Eretz Israel, Greater Israel, not just to be further established, but to be, at least for the time being, secure. The second key US neocon document is Frank Gaffney's Project for the New American Century, produced at the end of the last century. This advocated, and they set about securing through war, US hegemony over the whole world, ensuring perpetual access to the cheapest possible energy, oil and gas, military predominance for another century by breaking Russia and encircling China, and, of course, support for Israel. It's important to realise the neocons aren't confined to the USA. Indeed, when Obama refused to attack Libya, it was Britain's Conservative government that led the way in forcing the neocon agenda. David Cameron was the very first to call for a no-fly zone in Libya, which ended up in full-scale air war against the Libyan army and Gaddafi loyalists, leading to the seizure of Libya by Islamist extremists. Cameron was put in power and is surrounded by neocons. They picked on Cameron and pushed him because they feared that otherwise the anti-war right-winger David Davis would beat Ken Clarke and win, and that would never do. The Notting Hill set, who put Cameron in power, are fundamentally Osborne, Gove and Culture Secretary Ed Vaizey. On the eve of the Gulf War in 2003, Osborne told the House of Commons that he was won over by the, quote, excellent neoconservative case, unquote, for war. Don't say this thing's a conspiracy, they're really quite open about it. Michael Gove traces the roots of neoconservatism, that's the right to interfere in the affairs of sovereign countries, to 19th century British Tory Foreign Secretaries George Canning and Viscount Castlereagh. Gove believes that the invasion of Iraq was, quote, a proper British foreign policy success, unquote. I wouldn't want to see what a failure is, although if the neocons have their way in Syria, I'm afraid that we will. Gove and Nick Bowles founded Policy Exchange, Cameron's favourite think tank. Bowles went on to become Cameron's head of policy. The Notting Hill set used to meet in the Policy Exchange offices in London, and that's where they decided to push Cameron to the leadership. He launched his bid for leadership in June 2005 at a Policy Exchange event. Incidentally, one of Policy Exchange's many subsidiary projects was Nothing British About the BNP. The same people are also directly connected with those who set up and still manipulate the English Defence League. There's really no doubt about what the game is here. In order to help corral the white working class in Britain into fighting wars and to radicalising relations with ordinary Muslims in order to justify war in the Middle East, they were determined to get rid of the genuine nationalist party, the BNP, and put a phony alternative in its place. Fortunately they've succeeded, but we've had a pretty rough couple of years, as you know, dealing with those attacks. A key figure in Policy Exchange, and the research director on security issues, is a fascinating character called Dean Godson. His father Joseph was a Polish Jew who emigrated to the USA in 1926, aged 13. He became a member of the American Communist Party, but he shifted to the right when he became disillusioned with Stalin, particularly when Stalin became anti-Jewish, and he became a neoconservative, without going through the Trotskyite phase that most other neocons did when they went from this same shift from communism to ultra-capitalism. Godson worked for the Telegraph until Comrade Black lost control and the new editor sacked him, saying, quote, it's okay to be pro-Israel, but not to be unbelievably pro-Likud, unquote. Policy Exchange also crosses over in key figures in the Henry Jackson Society, which again figures in the study that I did some months ago of what lies behind the EDL. Signatories to this Henry Jackson Society, which is another key think tank pushing continually for war on behalf of giant American companies and the hardcore Israeli lobby. The signatories to its founding set of principles include Gove and Bowles. Among its international patrons are Richard, Prince of Darkness Pearl, the leading architect for the Iraq War, and Bill Kristol, who started the campaign to bomb Iran way back in 2006. Also involved with these people, of course, and absolutely at the forefront of the push for war in Syria and in due course Iran, is Foreign Secretary William Hague. Hague's connections with Alan Duncan, the man who used the British Air Force and the Foreign Office in order to help to destroy Gaddafi, in the interests of the oil company, the biggest in the world with which he deals, called Vitol, I've covered elsewhere and is still being covered. But less well known is that Haig is an advisor to Liam Fox's Atlantic Bridge organisation that promotes closer links between the US and British foreign policy. Other members of Atlantic Bridge's advisory board include Gove, Osborne and Tory MP Chris Grayling. In addition to being a key figure in the bombing of Libya back to the 7th century, William Hague also strongly supported the Iraq War and continually attacks European countries for what he calls extraordinary weakness in dealing with Russia. Cameron himself denies being a neocon, but he owes his position to them, consistently calls for action not just against Syria but also Iran, is continually hostile to Russia, which, as we saw at the beginning of this short study, is a key point with the neocons, and declares his belief in Israel to be indestructible. If he's not a neocon, he's doing a bloody good job of pretending to be. Cameron also, it should be noted, protected the neocons during the expenses scandal. Gove was described by the Daily Mail's Peter Osborne as, quote, one of the most notorious milkers of the expenses system, unquote. Ed Vaizey's fiddles included a claim for over £2,000 for antique furniture bought from a business owned by none other than David Cameron's mother-in-law. That's a real insight into the kind of petty minds that we're dealing with. These people are on a fortune. When you add in their speaking engagements, remuneration, what they get as non-executive of companies that they help make vast amounts of money, he doesn't really need to have a claim from the taxpayer for £2,000 of antique furniture. But there you are, grab, grab, grab. That's what they do. I think it's likely that unlike the French political elite, though, who've taken enormous backhanders, millions and millions of pounds into secret Swiss bank accounts from Qatar in return for trying to overthrow Assad, the British neocons are probably selling out British taxpayers, British soldiers and British interests for peanuts. In the end, it doesn't matter whether they're taking a couple of £1,000 or many millions of pounds. There's a word for what the neocon government of this country is doing, and that's treason.
Thank you, Nick. Very, very interesting, and good luck this weekend. World news. Saudi police stop wedding in park. Saudi Arabia's feared religious police raided a park in the Gulf Kingdom and stopped a wedding they considered as a violation of conservative local traditions. Hundreds of visitors to the park south of the capital Riyadh surrounded the newlywed Egyptian couple to take part in the party before members of the Commission for the Promotion of Virtue and Prevention of Vice entered the park and stopped the event. A source in the Commission said the wedding was stopped because it violated local traditions, as the bride was not covering her face and the groom was holding her hand and hugging her sometimes, Agel newspaper said. Qatar, new emir, new broom. The abdication of Sheikh Hamad in favour of his son Tamim will be felt far beyond the Gulf's richest state, not least in Britain, where its vast sovereign wealth fund has been very, very active. The Shard, Western Europe's tallest skyscraper, and fleets of tankers carrying natural gas to the rest of the world will rank among the Emir of Qatar's lasting achievements, but yesterday his legacy was being assessed in the light of his abdication. Sheikh Hamad bin Khalifa Al Thani stepped aside after exactly 18 years of reformist rule to make way for his 33-year-old Sherborne and Sandhurst-educated son in a swiftly executed handover. As power moved from father to son, the ruling family celebrated the first peaceful transition within its ranks in a century of shifting fortunes for the Gulf's richest state. World Today says, I think my listeners know exactly where the new emir can shove the Shard, don't they? Suggestions on a stamp, please. California man faces 13 years in jail for scribbling anti-bank messages in chalk. Jeff Olson, the 40-year-old man who is being prosecuted for scrawling anti-megabank messages on sidewalks in water-soluble chalk last year, now faces a 13-year jail sentence. A judge has barred his attorney from mentioning freedom of speech during the trial. According to the San Diego Reader, which reported on Tuesday that a judge had opted to prevent Olson's attorney from mentioning the First Amendment, free speech, free expression, public forum, expressive conduct or political speech during the trial, Olson must now stand trial for 13 counts of vandalism. In addition to possibly spending years in jail, Olsen will also be held liable for fines of up to $13,000 over the anti-big bank slogans that were left using washable children's chalk on a sidewalk outside of 3 San Diego, California branches of the Bank of America. The massive conglomerate that received $45 billion in interest-free loans from the US government in 2008-2009 in a bid to keep it solvent after bad bets went south. The Reader reports that Olsen's hearing has gone as poorly as his attorney might have expected, with Judge Howard Shaw, who is presiding over the case, granting Deputy City Attorney Paige Hazard's motion to prohibit attorney Tom Dusdell from mentioning the United States' fundamental First Amendment rights. Thought for the day: Alice through the looking glass. Today's thoughts initially and briefly cover some of the cutbacks and the effects on us Brits, but are linked together with the thoughts on the Oxford groomers and the effect that this case has had on ordinary people. Osborne has done it again, and despite the tirades of the Labour millipede, the Chancellor has had to levy cuts, and indeed they were around £11.5 billion worth this time around, and there are £23 billion worth of cuts to be made around the next election time. Now this time round foreign aid was left alone, which is tragic, but then again so was the NHS, and as the two seem to marry up in this country, 2 for 1 and none for us, this is the elephant in the room as usual. Education was cut by 1%, defence 1.9%, Home Office 6%, Business 6%, Transport 9%, the Treasury, Justice Department, local governments and Cabinet Office all 10%. The pensioners in the Algarve will no longer receive their cold weather allowance, and neither should they have ever received it. The teachers are now on strike up at the mill because they still want their automatic pay rises, which they will not get now, and why should they? Teachers are not what they used to be. They are politicised and, like most unions, expect the most for giving the worst. They're trying to say they'll not catch up with the private sector, of which there is very little left in the way of employment anyway, and those that are left, if not part of the professions, for instance law or medical, their employers go for the minimum wage immigrant workers anyway. How can we reduce our debt if no one is willing to give up just a small amount of salary to do so? They're lucky to have jobs is what I say to squabble about. The one light on the horizon, which according to Vince Cable should be handled in a sensitive way, was that immigrants applying for benefits should be able to speak English. I had to laugh over this one, as it really is shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted to the Tesco's butchers. When will any of our politicians realise that this particular boat sailed long ago? Every day we have hundreds more immigrants arriving, most go to relatives or the same tribe as them, if not the same religion, and many go underground, except when it comes to claiming benefits from our state. Most, if not all, have never spoken English, and most, if not all, of our fairly recent parasites speak their own tongues within their own ghettos. English has long ceased being the prime language in state schools, as we are all busy pandering to another racist culture. With it be a Moslem for a day, learn about Hinduism and Buddhism, and learn Mandarin instead of English. No wonder Cable was practically grovelling when he mentioned the word sensitive. How the hell can you be sensitive when it comes to millions of pounds going into foreign-owned homes and businesses just because people come over here to apply for funds to live? I would give Gable insensitive, matey. A clip on ITV showed a grinning Islamic woman in a scarf, ostensibly learning English so she could get money from our state. Do you really think this or any government will get the right people to enforce this and not a bunch of do-gooding multicultural idiots? Of course not. This is just another election ploy, and there'll be many more to come. All none enforceable in this country, because the Brits don't really want to appear insensitive to the rest of the world, who are laughing at us anyway. This new law will apparently apply to the new immigrants, so does that mean the ones pouring off the banana boats today, or the thousands of Eastern Europeans arriving not only today, but comprising the expected influx of next year? If so, most Eastern Europeans have a smattering of English, even if it comes to not speaking to English if caught by the border agency. And furthermore, have Osborne or Cable remembered the various agencies set up by Labour to help immigrants fill in forms to get money if they have language difficulties? What will happen to these very well paid persona? Also, one must remember they will be putting out of work all the translators that earn huge amounts of money from corporations, lawyers, government departments and the Polizei when called in. Now we come to the goings on in Oxford and the almost laughable story that was sent to me this week by David in Oxfordshire. You'll have to excuse me being rather harsh here, but I feel the dichotomy of this story, as in opposition to the Oxford sexual abuse case, is absolutely the way our establishment act and get away with it. Our lottery have funded a group of Pakistani Muslim women from Oxford who have been running a lunch centre because after 7 years it was facing closure due to lack of funding. They've been running this luncheon club at the Rose Hill Children's Centre in Ashurst Way every Thursday at a charge of £2.50 for a genuine Indian meal. It's fully attended by various peoples and is, in the words of the reporter of the Oxford Mail, very popular. They have won £30 a week for the ingredients of the food used from the lottery-funded Rose Hill Regeneration Project. The cook, Anne Hussain, who lives in Rose Hill, said, "It's a very popular service and it's great for the community that the lunch is continuing. I love cooking and it also gives me the chance to be creative with food. Whilst working here I have received my food hygiene certificate and become more confident." Oh bloody hell, what did she have before serving the general public? Miss Hussain cooks traditional recipes including curries with colleagues and friends Shazia Rashid and Sajida Sultana, who are also from Rose Hill. Friend Parveen Akhtar acts as an interpreter and helper. Now, call me nasty or small-minded, but Mrs Hussain, Rashid, Sultana and Akhtar have been running this lunch centre, probably in free premises, as a business for the last 7 years. And they are not handing out free meals to the poor, they are charging, albeit a small amount of money for the food. So they are a business. And despite all the diversity and multicultural claptrap being spouted, they have now got a weekly amount towards their cooking outlay from the idiots at the Council and UK Lottery. Call me mean-minded, but who is jumping on whose bandwagon here? Also, strangely enough, these ladies probably come from the same community that bred the Oxford sexual perverts. One in particular, the cook for the luncheons, Anne Hussain, shares the same last name as Assad Hussain and spelt the same way. Mr Hussain, 32, also lives in Ashurst Way in the Rose Hill area of Oxford and received a sentence of 7 years. Now, I'm not saying they are directly related, and Hussain, even spelt with an A, is not unusual in that community. But to live in the same area there must be some link in the family line, as mud sticks together. So we have maybe one of his family opening a business feeding the parents of the girls he might have been grooming. All very heartwarming, isn't it? What it does show is the mentality of many of these Muslim immigrants have towards members of the communities they settle in. They come here to make money out of us, not to give back in any sense of the word. And if they can do it ostensibly by giving to the community, they will, whilst all the time their countrymen are literally raping and torturing and enslaving a generation of youngsters under our noses. And if the councils and lottery can help as well, all the better to get even more money for that large house in Pakistan. As for the 7 men convicted, they should not serve their term in the UK. They and all their relatives should be deported forthwith and without money accrued from their business of grooming. The trial alone has cost the taxpayer millions of pounds. It was quoted in the Oxford Mail that Noel Lucas, QC prosecuting, said, "The depravity of what was done to the complainants was extreme. He told the jury that they would have to steel themselves to hear the evidence. The facts in this case will make you feel uncomfortable. Much of what the girls were forced to endure was perverted in the extreme. The children were taken to guest houses and empty houses thought to be kept for the abuse and prevented from escaping. They were subjected to humiliating and degrading conduct, including biting, suffocation, burning and scratching. Weapons including knives, baseball bats and meat cleavers were used during the torture, the court heard. The jury were told that sometimes men had urinated on the girls who were raped vaginally, orally and anally. And on the other side of the coin, or maybe not, the 3 cooks have been enrolled in an intensive English language course to build their customer service skills. And it's hoped a volunteer training programme will be run with the lunch by a lottery team so that residents can learn the skills needed to run a business. Volunteer Regeneration Project Coordinator Ali Hall said, "We're delighted to be able to have a hand in bringing such a diverse community together. It's a real opportunity for the ladies because they'll have the chance to develop their skills through training and look forward to expanding it as a business. They have already booked their first catering job at a community event, and we hope that in the future the ladies can deliver the lunch as their own social enterprise. So whilst handing out sentences which even the most severe case was life, but free to apply for release after 20 years, Mohammed Carrere, and nothing like the 95 years blared out by the media, which should apply to most of the accused, one section of their community is all loved up by the media, and these bastards have, quite wrongly, been under-sentenced, in my book. Are we that afraid or enthralled to the vast ever-growing pandemic of Islam in this country that our courts and police can't see the trees for the wood? I was going to make a pun on a nigger in a wood pile, but I won't, as I could be called racist or biased, and that just isn't me, my friends. Much has been made of Operation Bullfinch, as well it should, but for the judges to commend the social workers is almost obscene, as they could be dining every day at a certain lunch hole whose finances may well help acquiring cars and party houses for their menfolk to operate, just another business in Oxford. And I may be accused of being harsh here, but you look at the pictures of these cooks, you'll understand why perhaps some men would have preferred the grooming and abuse business. Although one cannot damn an entire religion for the acts of a few, what is happening in Oxford has been happening for many, many years further north in our country, and it is unknown, unreported and unwanted news. Now these and other crimes are being perpetrated throughout the south of the country and have become national, although the Oxford case, having cost the taxpayer millions of pounds, will vanish into the ether very soon, as most acts that have involved Islam over the years. Are we, like Alice, viewing England through the looking glass? And finally, has Saudi gone mad? Believe it or not, there's a picture of a conference in Saudi Arabia, and the subject of this conference was Women in Society, and yes, it was attended by men only. This has been reported in the Telegraph, and it's a good gag by whoever's come up with it. A room full of Saudi Arabian men supposedly coming together to talk about women in society without any women present. It's currently doing the rounds on Twitter, and all are laughing at the sheer hypocrisy of it. No one knows if the photo is really what it's supposed to relay, but is that absurd? No, because in Saudi women are not allowed to drive, women cannot vote or be elected to high political positions. Oh, and stoning them to death if they try to leave their husbands is still okay. It's not hard to make the leap then that Saudi Arabia would seriously actually run a conference about what to do with all these women, those who are rising up, who are starting to disobey the norms. Post the Arab Spring and this new world of politics, it is possible women may want a change in culture in the Middle East, and the men don't like it. Regardless, even if it is just a picture of any old get-together to talk about business or politics, it still screams alarm bells at you. The fact that no women are present is telling. This presenter says, yup, women may be a pain in the butt to the average guy, but we can put another perspective to discussions and laws. And Islam is not alone in putting females in their prospective places in life. By the way, I wish all who are attending the training weekend tomorrow a wonderful time, and I'm sure it will be a great success. However, on this one occasion, when I cannot go as I can't leave my better half while recovering from his heart attack, the venue promises to be much better than the venues of north of the Thames so commonly used. And I can say that the countryside around where they will be going this weekend is really beautiful and well worth the trip. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynne Moeller, wet, underpaid and exhausted in Hampshire, and I and the team at World at 8 and Radio Britain wish you all a very happy and a very safe weekend. No criminal record. A national police unit that uses undercover officers to spy on political groups is currently monitoring almost 9,000 people it has deemed domestic extremists. The National Domestic Extremism Unit is using surveillance techniques to monitor campaigners who are listed on the secret database, details of which have been disclosed to The Guardian after a Freedom of Information request. A total of 8,931 individuals have their own record on a database kept by the unit, for which the Metropolitan Police is the lead force. It currently uses surveillance techniques including undercover police, paid informants and intercepts against political campaigners from across the spectrum. Senior officers familiar with the workings of the unit have indicated to The Guardian that many of the campaigners listed on the database have no criminal record. European news. Nuclear industry watches thorium tests in Norway. A small Norwegian company is testing thorium fuel as a replacement for uranium at a reactor in Norway, catching the attention of the conventional nuclear industry, which has acknowledged that thorium could provide a safer and less weapons-prone nuclear power future. Oslo-based Thor Energy started burning thorium at a test reactor in Halden, Norway in late April. While thorium enthusiasts promote the element as a safer alternative to uranium, the conventional industry, built on uranium, often downplays the element named after the Norse god of thunder. Thus it was notable when World Nuclear News took part of the trial last week and played up thorium's potential superiority. WNA is part of the World Nuclear Association, a conventional nuclear industry group. In its story it pointed out that thorium promises higher operating safety margins and produces no plutonium as it operates. Ireland. Doctors warn Muslims with diabetes over Ramadan fasting. Muslims with type 2 diabetes in Ireland who intend to fast during the upcoming Ramadan are being warned that advanced planning with their doctor is vital to avoid developing acute complications. Many Muslims with diabetes may choose to fast during Ramadan, the 9th month of the Islamic calendar, observed worldwide as a month of fasting, despite guideline recommendations for the management of diabetes during this time. There are an estimated 49,204 Muslims in Ireland, according to the latest CSO figures, representing a sharp increase over the previous 5 years. Ireland's Muslim population includes 8,322 primary school-aged children and 3,580.
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynne Moeller. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday the 28th of June 2013. Lesbian murders 2-year-old son, is jailed for 18 years. Melanie Phillips, the British government's jihad against free thought. National Police Unit monitors 9,000 domestic extremists. Nuclear industry watches thorium tests in Norway. Ireland, doctors warn Muslims with diabetes over Ramadan fasting. Germany demands answers from Britain over GCHQ surveillance. Nick Griffin, MEP from the belly of the beast, on the neocon foreign policy. Saudi police stop wedding in park. Qatar, new emir, new broom. California man faces 13 years in jail for scribbling anti-bank messages in chalk. Thought for the day, Alice through the looking glass. And finally, women's conference? Oh really? UK news. Lesbian murders 2-year-old son and is jailed for 18 years. The child, described as beautiful to everyone who knew him, was brutally beaten to death by what police describe as a monster. Rebecca Shuttleworth battered little Keanu Williams to death in a horrific attack that the World at 8 refuses to describe. She recently celebrated a £10,000 lottery win with her lesbian lover in Manchester before being found guilty and said that will do for a nice holiday. Shuttleworth committed the murder in a bedsit in Birmingham where the toddler's body was found by police. One local person commented, "This is as brutal as what happened to poor Jamie Bulger, but because she's a lesbian it'll be played down in the light of political correctness. The child should have grown up in a normal family home." Melanie Phillips, the British government's jihad against free thought. By banning from the country, as extremists, the American anti-jihadis Robert Spencer and Pamela Geller, the Home Secretary Theresa May has not only made herself look ridiculous, but has sent the enemies of the United Kingdom the message that they have it on the run. I do not support the approach taken by either Geller or Spencer to the problem of Islamic extremism. Both have endorsed groups such as the EDL and others which at best do not deal with the thuggish elements in their ranks and at worst are truly racist or xenophobic. The result has been a serious blow to the credibility of these two writers, with particular damage being done to Spencer, whose scholarship in itself is scrupulous. It also has split the defence against Islamic extremism and handed a potent propaganda weapon to those who seek falsely to portray as bigoted extremists all who are engaged in the defence of the West against the Islamic Jihad. Nevertheless, the decision to ban this duo from Britain is unjustified, oppressive and comes perilously close to lining up the British government alongside those who wish to silence defenders of the West against the Jihad, making a total mockery of Britain's understanding of just who presents a danger to the state. Neither Geller nor Spencer remotely presents such a danger. They intended to come to Britain to join an EDL rally in Woolwich in the wake of the barbaric murder there of drummer Lee Rigby by 2 Islamists last month. More can be found on Melanie blog at melaniephillips.com. National Police Unit monitors 9,000 domestic extremists. Officers familiar with workings of UNIT indicate that many of campaigners listed on database have